Okay. So moving on to our next question, we often say content is king, but what makes content truly engaging for channel partners? And Dan, maybe if you can answer that one for us.
Yeah, and this is one that comes a lot in organizations. I think organizations make a lot of investment in their learning and development and training content um, organizations, and they really want to know what drives that success. And I think that when in the time that I've managed content and connecting that to overall strategy, I think it starts with that approach of leadership really getting on the same page and creating that strategy around what they want to accomplish with content. Because I think there often is a big disconnect in leaders thinking that building content is easy, right? They associate it with, I can throw PowerPoint slides together, I can take product spec sheets and, jazz it up and throw it out there and call it self-paced training. And at the end of the day, those are the things that really give learning organizations a bad reputation. So I think there are four things that I really look for in good content: interactivity and engagement. So how does the organization leverage polls and interactivity and quizzes and use that data to measure training and training outcomes? Gamification, as Jeff has talked about, I think is key. I think more organizations are starting to understand the benefit of having points associated with learning outcomes and measuring that through leaderboards and those other vehicles. I also think that having diverse content formats, I think, video is becoming really big in organizations. There's a lot of AI tools that allow you to create video quickly and easily. I think younger generations of learners are gravitating towards that type of media for learning, but you also have to make sure there's good data and infographics and other interactivities associated with the content in creating that diversification. I think the other thing that we hear a lot of is, training can be too long, right? So how do you create micro learning? How do you understand how to chunk learning objectives in a way that a learner can consume it based on their competency and skill levels, so it becomes relevant to them. And so having that, that diversification in the format, I think, is key. The third thing I really look for is accessibility and convenience. I think too often organizations make it difficult to get to learning content, right? So having systems in place, companies talk about learning in the flow of work. I think that's a real thing. I think companies are starting to figure that out, but having the right learning system in place so that when I need access to training or information, I can do that relatively easily and not have to, search through, different folders and files and, all the different repositories in an organization where things end up that make it, difficult to, consume um, content. And so that accessibility is key. But I think the last thing and probably most important is feedback mechanisms, right? So across, content, making sure, content can be rated and evaluated as it's being completed, making sure that there's data available on not only the outcomes and completions, but what types of questions and polls and quizzes are being challenged, are people having issues with, are getting, is a question always being completed correctly? So there's information there that tells us that maybe that's not the right question, but really using that that data and that feedback mechanism to make sure the content is having the impact that the organization is expecting, and being able to measure that in a way that not only the learner can see what their progress and their outcomes are, but at different levels of the organizations and the channel partners can see how relevant that information is, and associating that back to the outcomes that are expected that have been outlined in that strategy to say, we want these metrics to increase. We put this training in place. When we do these things and make these completions, we see these outcomes.
Yeah, you're seeing a move toward more of a headless LMS environment where training is being consumed just in the process of your day-to-day job. And one thing we rolled out about a year and a half ago was embedded training for SaaS applications. So you can be on a page and see a little icon with a little, a little book on it, and you click on it and it'll throw up a little 30-second video, just not on how to do the whole product or even how to do the whole page, but how to complete the function in just that small area you're working in. And it answers that question for you, and you get credit for consuming it through SSO. It shuts down, and then you go back to using the application. So trying to get the training into the user's hands at the point at which they're using your product is a great way of doing that. But micro learning is key. I mean, we've really turned into an ADD in economy where people have gotten used to TikTok. They've gotten used to 15 to 20-second videos and consuming that information and moving on, which even I think is so much better than, death by PowerPoint. Some 3-hour PowerPoint slide class is just, that's miserable. I mean, you don't want to put your people through that, and it's not a great way to train. There's so many new ways of doing that, and especially with the advent of AI, and what we're seeing is you have the ability now to just carry on conversations with an avatar, just like the video you're looking at now, and having a back and forth a confirmation and realization that you're not just memorizing numbers and facts from slides and then spitting those back out to your customers. You're actually engaging in a conversation. You're listening. You're asking the right questions. And that has a huge effect on sales at the end of the day, because you can always just hand a PDF to somebody with all the facts and figures about your products. But being able to listen to their problems and the issues they're having, and being able to come up with a helpful solution using their language is really key to selling, I think, in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think
Dan,
that goes back.
sorry, go ahead there, Dan.
Yeah, Jeff, no, I was just gonna say, I think, Brett, that goes back to the whole, how do you create the right value proposition? What's the strategy for your channel partners, and really not just creating training based on benefits of a product, but it's, services, features, how that is can be sold, right? Having use cases and examples, and being able to provide a coach on call, right? So that if a particular product or service issue needs to be studied or learned, there's a way to get access to those short videos in a way that helps me in that issue that's relevant to that problem that I'm having at that point in time.
Yeah, and your partners are not just selling your products; they're selling all your competitors' products,
Right.
and all your competitors are trying to get all those people trained as well. So there's a real battle for the mind share out there of these people, and you cannot give them hours and hours of courseware and expect them to take time away from selling every day to meet your needs. You have to get in, you have to be efficient, you have to get the information over as quickly as possible, and hopefully help make them more successful at their jobs. And you just can't take advantage of that relationship.
Dan, Brad, I'm curious on the content side as well. Most of the companies, I think, come into the channel partner training with the mindset of offering their own product training as the content source of their program. But I'm seeing now with some of the other companies that I work with that there's a bit of a mind shift is providing that industry professional knowledge training so that they're establishing themselves as the authority in the space. And then, of course, their product training is available in the same, I'm going to say the same space. Is that something that you're seeing as well? Or can you speak to, like, maybe even in your past, like what have you seen work well in that in terms of the content that they're providing?
Well, you can provide all the information about your products you want to the salespeople, but if they are not particularly good salespeople, then it's irrelevant, right? They're just going to spit those numbers
Yeah.
back. So I am seeing is a move where companies and manufacturers are investing in providing training, general sales training to these people. Like, how do you ask for a contract? How do you ask questions about what their issues are? People are willing to, some companies are willing to invest in helping making these people better salespeople, period, regardless of the products they're selling. And I think that's critical, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are in sales that, took a job, they wanted it, but they might not be gifted salespeople. Not everybody has that gift. So stepping back and trying to help mold them into better general salespeople, you can benefit from that dramatically, right? Because the more they're selling, the more commissions they're making, the more money you're making. So I think it's a really wise investment to try and help offer just basic general sales help to some of these folks.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. And I think that's where, again, when you look at any organization, they have a ton of content, right? They have, marketing departments, they have product development, they have app dev, they have, customer support, client experience, all these organizations that are capturing, processes and procedures and documentation and having a strategy that pulls all of that together, right? In the right type of content management system knowledge base so that it's accessible. But then to your point, Brett, it's not just about all of that information on how to do things or how things are put together or the flow of an application or that, but it is how do I sell that, right? So how do I build a package, a learning path, content that takes the what and the how and combines it in a way that I can consume it and practice that, right? And then get feedback on that approach so that I know whether or not I'm making progress in my ability to use the information that's available in the organization in a practical manner that allows me to be successful. And I think that's the pivot organizations are making, to your point, Brett, is they're realizing that the soft competencies, the technical knowledge and the process knowledge is easy to get in an organization, but putting that in a way that someone can use it in a competency model that allows them to sell or close or negotiate is really where organizations are making that pivot.
It's also a litmus test, because if you put that training out there and no one consumes it, that tells you something about your partners. But the ones that take the time to actually go out there and make that effort, they're identifying themselves as somebody that wants to improve their business. And you should be able to treat them, I think, as a better partner that way.